week, Congress was pushing for us to send something out, which I think we're submitting today or tomorrow, to allocate like $60 million to survivor-related efforts. And one of the biggest issues I had is working with the team to produce this information is that I think a lot of the anecdotal evidence that we currently have is not sufficient to draw evidence-based conclusions about what the actual needs are on the ground. And coming from a thorough public health background, working in the field, I have a lot of kind of issues with making those kinds of decisions without reliable information. So I'm just coming from your side as a scientist who's been in the field, what would you say are actually the needs of survivors as opposed to the things that we've kind of assumed, like stigma or whatever we would like to think based on drawing from conclusions from, other examples, what survivors may be experiencing, but without getting that actual knowledge of this unique situation.
I am so glad that that's happening. I'm really heartened to hear that. I think you'll see from Carl's, maybe the segment of his film, I think stigma and discrimination are real issues. I think that economic dislocation is a huge issue right now. And, everyone who's been touched by Ebola has suffered some kind of economic dislocation. So I think from my perspective, again and again, that's kind of what I saw with survivors is that they might find these temporary jobs like working in the response, but once that's gone, what is there going to be for them? So I know there are some NGOs that are working on sort of trying to retrain survivors and things like that. So I think that's a big problem. And I think the lingering medical issues are also a problem. I know that there are some research efforts underway on that. So you probably know who they are, but if not, I can connect you with, researchers who are actually kind of studying, what are the health needs that they have. But I'm so really glad to hear that, and I'd love to talk to you more about it afterwards.
All right, so we're going to switch over and have Carl introduce his film. He'll tell you a bit about the film and show a clip from it, and then we can switch over to full Q&A for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I want to thank the Pulitzer Center as well, because they have been supporting me on a couple of projects for several years now. For me, it was a little bit like with Erika. I wanted to go there to Liberia last fall because I wanted to know how Liberians experienced the outbreak, and I was a little bit frustrated with the news reporting because it was either focusing on things happening in the US or in Europe, or it was focusing on the international relief effort, which of course was important, but as I figured out, and as Erika figured out on the ground as well, the real tough work was also done by Liberians and Sierra Leoneans and Guineans. So I went to Liberia last autumn, and I went to a county in central Liberia and to a treatment center there, where I was going out with the ambulance team every day, where they were picking up patients because the virus had moved out from Monrovia, from the capital, to the countryside. And it presented a whole different set of challenges how to contain it, because some of the places were very inaccessible and the contact tracing was very difficult to make. When I was there in the treatment center, I heard about the case of a man named Stanley, whom you meet in the film, and everybody was talking about his case because somehow it captured the fears of all the Liberians, and the radio was talking about it. It was a man, Stanley, who took his son, who was in quarantine in Monrovia. He took him out of quarantine because before the quarantine was finished. And he took him back to the village, probably because as a father, he wanted to have him near him. And the villagers said, don't do it, because you don't know whether he's incubating Ebola and he'll get sick. But Stanley is a bit of a stubborn man, and I think he's always done what he thinks is right, and he did it. And the son got sick, and he infected the entire family. Stanley lost his 4 children and his wife. He himself got infected, but he survived. And 14 people in the village died, and 26 got infected. So when Stanley was released from the Ebola treatment unit, he couldn't go back because the villagers were very angry. And I followed him, so I ended up spending 2 months in Liberia, and I followed his story, but I also followed a couple of, or 3 other stories of another survivor and of an ambulance nurse who decided to help in the fight, and of a pastor. You will meet all of them in the film. I show like 20 minutes of it, and then we can talk a little bit more about it. How does that work now? You'll do it. Sure.
Oh.
Okay, we switch off the light. Mm-hmm. Are you playing from DVD? I try to adjust the full screen.
This message comes to you from the Ministry of Health.
Ebola situation for many cases in Central Africa. Most cases Ebola. And Ebola respond to the crisis. Also, there have been analysis of the new cases. To confirm it. This is Ebola situation report on Radio Ghana. This is where you get the latest update about the Ebola situation in Central Liberia.
My dear people of this great country, this is Joseph Maboka, the Vice President. I come to you today with a heavy heart. Our country is under attack from Ebola. It is killing our people and disrupting our lives. I extend my condolences to the families of those who have died of the disease. We all know that Ebola is real. Ebola kills. We want you to live. So let's work together to beat the Ebola. God bless you.
It is fall 2014, the height of the Ebola outbreak. By now, over 5,000 people have died, and every day hundreds more are still getting infected. Here in Liberia, the virus has broken out of the capital, Monrovia. Ebola is now spreading uncontrolled through the rest of the country.
Brother and sister, father, or mother, we say thank you, Lord. We pray that your soul rest in perfectly. We pray for the remaining family. We pray that your grace will guide and carry them through, and Lord will make a provision. Thank you, Father. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Mummy Jua had died the night before, and this was her birth. Ebola had infected the entire Jua family, Mummy, her husband, and their 4 children. We met Mummy's husband, Stanley, the day he was released from the Ebola treatment unit.
And last song. see the place, and then when running, you are seeing it. It's a matter of us going back to the context. Yeah? See, this is what that's the thing about working.
Stand it level.
That's what's terrible. Double.
Stanley lost his entire family because of a fateful decision. He had defied a quarantine order, and everyone is now talking about his case.
Jefferson Massa with the Ebola situation report. Welcome back to the program. We take our first development.
According to the County Health Team, residents of Taylortown have refused to accept Mr. Stanley Chua, a general community health volunteer who brought his son from Monrovia, an Ebola suspected patient, to a community that later died.
Today my children die in a center with my wife. Because the one over there, they get fired. As I said earlier, no family again. No family again. And those that have been infected from the barrel, most of them died. About 8 people died. So those people, there are people in the town, they are bleeding. They say, I took somebody with Ebola and carried them in the town, so at the cost of their people to die. So that the parents now are facing human home. I'm scared to go there.
With every day, the outbreak in Bong County continues to grow. The ambulance team is picking up more and more cases. And the doctors at the Ebola treatment unit, the ETU, are afraid they may soon have to reject new patients.
We got a call from the county team that they have 2 patients who are walking, coming to a position where we usually pick them. So we are planning on how we're going to go and pick them up. In the last 4 days, we picked around 22 patients from that village. Yeah. So we are trying to get the bearings, then we look in our map, and then we roll and go and pick them up.
These converted pickup trucks are the most reliable way to safely transport highly infectious patients in this difficult terrain. Mabel Musa and her team have been at this non-stop for months. But knowing what to expect is still impossible. All we know is that a group of sick people have been hiking out from a village deep in the bush to a clearing where Mabel and her team can pick them up.
I always keep it at the back of my mind that Ebola is very deadly, so I don't come in contact with my patients that I go for. I do interview them from a distance, so I always take my preventive measure by not touching my eyes, nose, and mouth, and then I'm protected when I'm in the field.
How are you? The fire needs to me. So the alarm will carry you. You will be there, they say your blood. Tomorrow, your blood result will come. But when on the segment, they will keep you there, will be giving you medicine. We can feed it for 3 times a day. In the morning, in the afternoon, in the night. We can't spray people. They say you see the first doing, they play you walking or they play you sitting, and they say will be for you to enter. But when I spray yourself, so don't be scared. The problem is get a work and solve the problem. Yeah? the patient in the car. Then you wash the water outside, yeah?
With the man named Tao safely in the pickup, Mabel and her team are ready to go. But suddenly, two more people appear. One of the two women, clinging to a walking stick, is visibly ill with the symptoms of Ebola. She's so weak she can barely stand. Her name is Punawene.
The three patients that we are caring, they all have the same contact. That is the boy who is Tao Bono. His father died in Bono Town in the village here. Then his mother is also ill and his aunt. So they all took care of the father when he was sick and he died. Now they are all presenting symptoms. Ebola is, I don't even know how to describe Ebola because it had affected some family members that are out there. I get in a field, get patients from a house that there's no family left in a house. Ebola have taken everyone away. And then the elders in the town will then lock the door and then come with the last patient, only to see that you will lost the patient at the ETU. So the community, some people get very afraid. You find out that children are in the town, there's no parent because Ebola killed their mother, the father. So it's very, very discouraging, disheartening to the community.
The ETU is a world of fences, isolating those who are healthy from those who are infected.
My head hurting, then my stomach pinching, and when getting the giving time, my skin can get hot. And when I go pee, my pee will breathe. That one there, they call love, Uno. When the girl, she was pregnant.
Your daughter?
Yes. Do all were taking care of them. After he died, he gets sick. He started getting sick. Then my puppy died. When he died, he was supposed to come bury. He not come again. He said, "I will bury me." Put in the home. And therapy, I get a sickness from.
Tao and his aunt Punawene have tested Ebola positive. Their chances of surviving the next few days are less than 50%.
But sometimes when you come with someone and you think you people talk and they were very strong, only at the end of the day, in less than 1-2 hours, they will change. And then when you go back the next morning, you ask for the patient, they tell you the patient have died, because for every patient we come with like today, or we go back the next morning, we check on the board, alive or dead, you will see the result. So as a nurse, these things happen every time. You just have to make your heart so strong to continue your work.
Those who survive Ebola return to a world that eyes them with fear and suspicion. We tracked down Stanley in a suburb of Monrovia, where he was hiding with relatives.
My son was not sick. I am this stupid. I went for Ebola training. We went for the washer. 3 days in Banga. There was no sign in Sidon. I saw as a suspect my son. He was not suspected by being on the sound of Sidon. No. So I say he was well healthy. If I knew that he had Ebola, I couldn't care uniform. He was still.
Few days ago, Stanley himself came to me and told me that he was a victim of Ebola. And I personally told him, you're free for Ebola camp, but you're not free to come live in our community. And I'm sorry for the death of your family, but it would be better you go right back to where you come from. And he told me, he said, Papi, I'm on the wanted list where I am from, because people are claiming me to be the one who took Ebola on that side. So if I go there, they might likely kill me.
Stanley's situation is now so unstable, a pastor has gotten involved.
The first time they called me to the ETU, I was called to talk to Stanley because he has attempted killing himself. And I said, why? He said, well, the people were still blaming him. So for the people, he intentionally brought the boy into the town to kill up the people in the town. That's their perception. So part of our psychosocial role is to see how we can talk with Stanley and the people and see what they can see reason to let go of what has happened and see how they can reunite themselves and reinvest Stanley back into the town.
Reverend Victor Padmore has come to Taylortown. Quarantined and cut off from the outside world for weeks, Taylortown has been through very difficult times. Because Stanley had defied the town chief, who had forbidden him to bring his son into the community, 26 people became ill, and 14 have now died of Ebola.
Stanley, I do go back, and then I don't know about what for the day. So, do me the who could be able to keep our deed if you want that.
Stanley still has family in Taylortown. Shunned by her fellow villagers, Stanley's mother-in-law is grieving over the death of her daughter and grandchildren.
We just came to speak to Stanley's mother-in-law and see how she's doing. At the onset when her daughter died and the grandchildren, Well, so the people would come to her and say, "Are you crying?" You're laughing at us. It's like because the source of the thing comes from the background of family. So she shouldn't be crying because other people have, but what can she do? She said, I can do anything, I can just pass by them or I just keep quiet and then let them go by. But she herself is sorry.
The hate for Stanley runs deeper than we ever expected. There are even rumors of a plot to have him killed.
Somebody told me that you were very bitter with Stanley. People started telling me, oh, Meo were planning, you were gathering group to attack Stanley. Is that something that? No. Okay. Because you know, if even Stanley stands a risk, anybody can do anything. If people realize that you are doing something, you say you was part of it. Your mother is dead, you can't get her, but you still need to live. You got sisters and brothers that you left behind. Right now you feel hurt. You feel hurt. But you know, these children that you have, your brothers and sisters, you're responsible for them. One thing will happen. You will never ever avoid stop saying Stanley. So take that courage. It's not easy to be a man, but now you're becoming a man. There are things that you don't want to take, you have to take because you have a responsibility.
Ebola has turned neighbors into enemies. So I stop it here. The film will be broadcast on Al Jazeera later this year and on Arte in Germany and France. And yeah, this is just the beginning. You get an idea of the story, and the film follows this story till the end when Stanley eventually will confront the village. And also follows the motivation of Mabel, the ambulance nurse, why she did it, and she has her doubts as well. And also of the three people whom we picked up, we followed them through the course of their sickness, but one of them died and one survived and the other tested negative. So just to conclude everything, for me, yeah, this film was, I mean, I told you my motivation, but what I realized is how this virus really had the capacity to tear communities apart. We shouldn't be very quick to judge the people in Taylorstown because they went through a huge loss. There was almost no family that wasn't affected. Stanley did a mistake as well, but it was puzzling to see that everyday actions, which you may make mistakes, we all make mistakes every day. In this Ebola context, they were just amplified out of proportion. And this was a country that came from civil war, and everybody said to me all the time, Ebola is worse than the war, because when there was war, we knew our enemy, and if the enemy was there, we would go the other way. But with Ebola, your enemy were those that were next to you, and often those that were the closest to you, you looked after. And that sowed a lot of distrust and confusion, and I think that will linger on for a long time, these problems. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'll give this to Erika. So we're going to do a little bit of question and answer. I'll start with just a couple questions, then we'll open it up to you guys. Just want to start with Erika. I think probably everyone in this room has some opinion about how media coverage of Ebola was. You know, where the strengths were, where the weaknesses were, how much of it was true, how much of it was not totally accurate. But I think, Erika, you are among probably the most suited to evaluate your peers and evaluate where you fit into the mix of Ebola reporting. So could you just speak a little bit to something I've heard you talk about, which is what you saw as the media coverage of Ebola and how you wanted to fit into that mix?
Sure, thanks. I think that for understandable reasons, there just weren't as many reporters able to be on the ground getting the stories in West Africa as we maybe would have liked. And so I think that the story that came out was very much focused on, you know, the impacts that it was having on other places, like Carl mentioned, like here or in Europe. And I think the other thing about it that I really felt was a lot of it was just so not factually based. It turns out that it's actually, you know, I wouldn't have recommended that anybody casually travel there, but it is quite hard to get Ebola, which you wouldn't know from, you know, the coverage. The coverage made it sound as if people were sort of staggering around in the streets like zombies, and, you know, the minute they looked at somebody, you know, that person would become sick, and that's just not true. It's a virus that is spread through, you know, bodily fluids. It is not airborne. And, you know, if you were able to wash your hands and stay away from people you knew were sick, then you were not at very high risk of catching the virus. And I think that message just didn't come across. You know, Carl was able to move safely. I was able to move safely. You know, journalists I know who lived in the countries were able to move safely. And I think that was sort of the number one distorted picture I think that people got, is that there was something, you know, uniquely contagious and bad about Ebola. It's not true.
Great. And then just one question for Carl before we move to the audience. Something I find unique about this film is that it seems like almost not a single person looked at the camera. And it's evident that you really gained the trust of the people you were with to be able to be present in some of their most intimate moments, such as the one we saw of Stanley. Looking at these graves, and whether they didn't notice you or they trusted you enough that they were able to ignore you being there and just be genuine. How did you gain that kind of trust with the people you worked with?
I think it's always, first of all, I think you have to be honest, very honest, why you're here and what are you doing. And it was actually the opening scene. Stanley asked me to come with him to the gravesite. I didn't even ask him. So it's trust, and then once you have the trust and you're honest, and that always happens, is people just forget you. In the worst case, you're a nuisance, the guy who's always around with his camera. In the best case, they just forget you. And I didn't really direct anything. When we went to Taylortown with the pastor, he told me he's going to go there, and we all knew what he's going to do. And he informed the people that we are coming, and for them it was okay. I think there was a sense which helped, because it was extraordinary. It helped because the people really had an urge to talk, an urge to not only talk, but to communicate. I had sometimes the feeling it was almost therapeutic to them. It was so hard to express what was going on. And they really appreciated that somebody was there, and they always thanked me that I was there to document that. And you know, I felt really awkward, but I think that was one of the reasons as well why they were so totally natural. Yeah.
Awesome. Open it up to any questions from you guys. If anyone has anything.
Yeah. You spoke of misperceptions, particularly misperceptions about the infectiousness of the disease. I was interested to hear for both of you, since you were in different countries, how your sense of perceptions or misperceptions of the role of military and security forces in, for better or for worse, and foreign versus local in Ebola response, either in infection control or the actual construction of and treatment through ETUs. Speak to that.
Sure. There wasn't as much of a military presence in Sierra Leone, so I can't really speak as much to that. I assume you'd be able to, having been in Liberia.
Yeah, in Liberia there was a military presence, and the Liberians loved them, and because they did a really important job. The military knows about logistics. They know about how to move things around quickly, which they did, and they built testing centers, labs, where they did PCR tests, and at the end they had the tests within 4 days. 4 hours, not 4 days, 4 hours. So no, I mean, really, the Liberians will never forget that in a very, very positive sense. They told me a funny thing that, I don't know whether you're a military guy, but they had They had Black Hawk helicopters when they came, and when they landed, apparently it's standard procedure to have 4 guys getting out of the helicopter to secure the landing site with machine guns. And the Liberians were very amused, and they were like, I know that they're not invading us, are they? But they called them Marines, and they were really proud that the Americans came, and they really, really appreciated this effort. And I think it made a huge difference. Yeah. Any other questions? Now yeah.
Does everybody speak English? Do the people in the villages speak English? It wasn't clear to me.
They speak English to a varying degree, like Tao, the man we picked up, he spoke actually English. I don't know whether you understood it. I understood it after a while, but it's quite a pidgin. Then like Mabel, she speaks English. In the villages, not everybody speaks English. They speak a language that's called Pele. And that's a language that's only spoken in that region. But then you would always find somebody in a village who would speak English, could translate.
And what about the Christianity versus other religion? How, I mean, obviously this pastor was important in this village.
Yeah.
But is there sort of conflict? What's the religious structure?
Yeah. I don't know the percentages, but some counties are more, I don't know whether there are more Muslims, but definitely there are more Muslims than in Bong. Bong is very Christian. And they are very religious. And here they are very Christian, but there are other counties where you have a large proportion which is Muslim. But it was never really, I didn't feel it was an issue. So not really, no. You see mosques, but I never heard really hearing, oh, these are the Muslims or these are the Christians and they're doing that. It wasn't that much of an issue. Yeah.
Just wondering, did you get some perspectives on, did they blame the government or like their country's response to it, or was it more just, how's it transmitted, and they were kind of more like just village perspective, or did they kind of do bigger picture blaming?
It became extremely political in Sierra Leone. So there were stories that there were all kinds of rumors and stories, and I think this goes back to the legacy of countries that had been in civil strife, and it wasn't really clear always that you could trust authority. And so there were stories that a certain political party had introduced the disease in the South because that political party wanted to win the elections, and they were based in the North. I heard that it was introduced by a particular group of scientists, which was really hurtful, I don't want to say hurtful, but it was hard for these scientists because they were the ones who were sort of working to help develop, treatments and care for patients. So yes, it became very political, and there were all kinds of rumors, and understandably so, because it was, chaotic, and that the lines of authority were not necessarily clear.
It's funny because I think of the 3 countries, Liberia has the best government. I just say that now, it's not on record. And for me, it also correlates how the response was. It was best in Liberia, then second best in Sierra Leone, and third best in Guinea. And Guinea is just messed up. And I only was in Bong, but I never heard any weird conspiracy theories or anything. It's funny that you heard it. I never heard it. They were very informed, and yes, they were critical about their government, but in a very democratic way, because I remember that, I don't know when it was, but there should have been elections, and then there were already rallies going on. I think it was in December or something. So the outbreak was going down, but there were rallies going on, and then everybody said, but why do they hold elections now? They should postpone it. Because we shouldn't have all these people in the street and so on. So they were very critical in their government, but in a very informed sense. But I never heard that their government was a total failure or conspiracy theories. They were really, they had an idea what was going on. They understood the hospitals are closed and so on. They were more critical actually towards Bong is bordering Guinea. And they were critical towards the Guineans and the Guinean authorities because they said they don't get their outbreak under control and they are not working as efficiently as we do. And if we are Ebola free, then it comes over from Guinea again because, you know, the borders are so porous. So that was my experience in Bong County. So it's not representative for the whole of Liberia, but just in this county. Yeah.
I guess one question I have to ask you both is, how do you think, or in your experience, how does reporting on infectious diseases differ from other reporting that you've done? You've both done, you know, reporting across several topics in biology and science, but I think there's probably a lot of not only precautions, but other things that come into play when it comes to working in this field. Do you want to go first? Or?
Yeah, because I have an easy answer.
Okay.
I'm a filmmaker. I always think in images. If I go for a story, I try to imagine how I'm going to film it and what visual worlds I'm going to explore. And with infectious diseases, that's not easy because often they're hidden and you can't see them. And I never went inside the ETU and filmed sick people because I was like, I thought that's dehumanizing. But with Ebola, I really wanted to focus on the emotional impact, and I knew that I'm going to find it because it was such a massive thing and such a weird thing. So that's for me as a filmmaker. I think with other infectious diseases, I would think very hard, how can I tell these stories in images? You know, that would be my first idea.
I think that different from other areas of science, which is what I do, there's a real there's an emotional resonance in a good way and a I don't want to say a bad way, but I think infectious diseases, they carry a weight in all of our minds that's a little bit different from other things like diabetes or chronic illness. Not to say that those shouldn't, because they absolutely should. But there's something about infectious disease that I think kind of grabs us a little. I don't know if it's a little bit of feeling like, you know, we don't really quite understand it. We don't really have a lot of it under control. And so, you know, there's something about it, I think, that is emotionally resonant for us that's a little bit different from other areas of health and medicine. And I certainly feel that as a reporter when I go in to cover these stories, is that I approach it very, you know, with reverence and a little bit differently than I do other kinds of things that I write about.
Yeah, I would like to add something. The Ebola outbreak is, I thought very hard when I came back that I ever will experience anything like that again, because it was I would say it was an existentialist setting where the backdrop was such that human conflicts and human emotions were carved out crystal clear. They were almost there for you to grab. And it was extraordinary to see that and to experience that. And I think you always search for something like this. But the only thing I could come up with, you go to a war zone. But a war zone is different because I think it's, you know, you have an enemy, you have so much hatred and so on. But there, everybody was in the same boat. And this film is not about Ebola, it's about guilt and redemption and forgiveness and so on. It's a very human thing we can relate to. But this backdrop just carved it out, and it was there. So it was really extraordinary. Good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Drinks.
Thank you both so much for being here. Really appreciate
Thank you.
it. If anyone else has questions for them afterwards,
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.